Hi, everyone. I'm Rick Barron, your host, and welcome to my podcast, That's Life, I Swear. My guest today is Dr. Theresa Lyons. Now, today's conversation is about autism, but it's not in the way most of us have been taught to think about it. Families have been told autism is lifelong, unchangeable, and something you simply learn to live with. But what if that story is incomplete? Dr. Theresa Lyons has a PhD in computational chemistry from Yale, a former pharmaceutical strategist, and a mother whose life changed the moment her daughter was diagnosed with autism. Now, instead of accepting, well, there's nothing to be done, Dr. Lyons did what scientists do. She questioned, researched, and followed the evidence. Now, what she discovered challenged long-held assumptions and opened a new conversation about what autism is, and more importantly, what it doesn't have to be. Dr. Lyons helps parents around the world understand the science of autism in human terms, not with promises, not with hype, but with clarity, compassion, and hope grounded in research. This is a conversation about intuition, grandparents, and parents, and why autism may not be a lifelong sentence for everyone. That said, please join me as I have my conversation with Dr. Theresa Lyons. Dr. Lyons, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me here. I'm very excited.
I've been looking forward to having this conversation with you. Now, for the benefit of the audience, could you kind of give us a brief background on what you've been doing, how you got into this, just a little bit of history?
Sure. So a little bit of history. I love chemistry. Always loved chemistry as a kid. I'm mixing different things in the basement of my mom's cleaning solutions.
Well, that could be dangerous.
Very dangerous. Making bubbles and smells that should not be inhaled. But that was me. I was always very curious and wanted, what if I do this? What if I do that? So that's the kind of person I am. So chemistry was my love, and that's what I did. I have a bachelor's in chemistry. I have a master's in organic chemistry. I have another master's in general chemistry, and then my PhD is in computational chemistry. So definitely, I love chemistry. And after that, I worked in the pharmaceutical industry. So my PhD research was on structure-based drug design. And then that applies obviously very easily to the pharmaceutical industry. And I worked in R&D for a little bit and then transitioned more to the business side and became a medical strategist. So that was really understanding the business of the pharmaceutical industry, clinical trial design, publications, continuing medical education. How do you get doctors to talk about the pharmaceutical? So that was a different side of the pharmaceutical industry, but I certainly enjoyed that. And then my daughter was diagnosed with autism. And I asked, okay, now what? And the answer really was not acceptable. Basically, there's nothing really you can do. It only gets worse. It doesn't get better. And that, as a strategist, that wasn't an acceptable answer because I was expecting to, okay, give me the guidelines. And what are the cutting edge? Tell me about the research. And I wanted and was expecting just all these different options, and I wasn't given that.
Did the people who told you, well, there's nothing we can do, did they even give you some insight as to why there was nothing that could be done?
No, and that is part of why autism can be so frustrating because an autism diagnosis is made based on observation. So you go to a specialist, so either a pediatric neurologist or a developmental pediatrician. A general pediatrician cannot make an autism diagnosis because they don't have enough specialized training. So you go to a specialist and it's based on observation. There's no urine test, no MRI, no blood test, no stool test. There's no medical test that then says, okay, this is autism. So to get at that why, right? So why is my daughter not speaking? Yeah, we don't know. Why is she doing these repetitive things? We don't know, right? Like so it's just very empty. And as a chemist, right, I'm thinking on the molecular level, well, there's got to be a reason, right? Like, what is the reason? So that's what got me going in that direction.
I see. So, in terms of, and this is kind of a good segue because I was doing some more research on you and about going to doctors who, well, we don't have an answer, but I think you took it to another step. And what I mean by that is that I discovered that you wrote a book in 2020 about autism and functional medicine doctors. And very quickly, the synopsis of the book, I understand, is a list of doctors in the United States who work with children with autism and who are passionate about uncovering the root cause of many symptoms and that come along with autism. How did you pull that together? What was the spark that said, I need to do something that could really, someone could read and say, look, this gives me a direction where I could at least begin to talk to someone who truly understands my world?
Well, I will say one thing that an updated version will be released this summer. So yes, it was
Ah,
in 2020 when I started that. The whole premise of that book was as I started working with parents one on one, I got up to speed very quickly on who are the doctors who are able to ask that question why and then figure out answers. So it's a different way of practicing medicine.
mhm.
So for conventional medicine, a lot of times it's all right, short-term view, let's just resolve the issue, but not really get at the root cause, just kind of a band-aid approach. And so as I was working with parents one-on-one throughout the country, I started having this Rolodex, right? Because I would have a new person I was working with, and they're like, okay, we need a good doctor. All right, let me look into it. So and they wanted my level of good doctor, right? So I started having this list of good doctors who wanted to work with kids with autism, because many times we take our kids with autism to someone and they don't really want to deal with autism because it's so complex. So that was the first hurdle, like finding doctors that really wanted to work with kids with autism. And then ones that were knowledgeable, so functional medicine based, integrative medicine based. They're trying to understand on a molecular level what's going on with the body. And so I ended up having an exhaustive list of doctors in the United States. And these were all doctors that I would take my daughter to, so it was that level of trust. I had spoken to all of them, and there was a wait list of parents to work with me. And I thought, you know what? Why don't I put this as a book so that parents can at least get that part of the process going? And that was the whole reason for making the book.
Well, that must have taken quite some time to pull all that together. I mean, all those
It
states.
did. It did, and the updated version, yes. But I am happy to say that there are more doctors now, functional medicine doctors, working with kids with autism than there was in 2020. Many
Mm.
have retired, so I was really sad to see that, but it's good to see that there are other people stepping in.
So, kind of going into the world of when a parent discovers that their child has autism, what are some of the initial questions that they bring to you? And I guess having thought about this prior to our discussion right now, I can understand what the parent may be thinking, but I've always wondered, what does the child think as they're sitting there with their parent talking to this doctor? So, if you could, Dr. Lyons, could you describe maybe a scenario of what that would entail?
Sure. So, after doing this for so many years and seeing kids change, I am very confident in that regardless of the child's behavior. So they might be jumping or stimming or not paying attention or they're not able to speak. I am quite confident that they can understand me at any level that I'm talking at. So many times kids with autism, they're just written off as, well, they can't express what they know, so they don't know anything. And that's really not true. So as the kids get healthier and healthier, one aspect that I love is when parents are like, how did he know that? I've heard that so many times. So when I have any conversations with parents and the kids are present, I typically talk to the kids. Even when the parents are like, "Well, he doesn't," I'm like, "No, he understands. Trust me." He understands, and a lot of times then the child comes closer and is hanging out, and I'm not necessarily looking for a specific answer from the child, but I'm talking to the child as if they could answer, as if they
Hmm.
are listening. And a lot of times they really start to show some abilities and show interest that then spark the parents. They're like, "Oh, okay." So as to what they're thinking, sometimes, I mean, afterwards, sometimes kids will tell me, "Oh, when we met with this one doctor over there, he was talking about, putting me on this drug or that drug, and." I got very upset, and that's when, sometimes a kid might have a meltdown. And then the parent, very intuitive parents, can start to say, maybe he didn't like what the doctor was saying. So there's always this question, is my child's behavior trying to communicate something? So that's one difficulty that parents have, but kids with autism typically are communicating just in different ways than what we're expecting.
So trying to put myself in a child's body and hearing my parent speak with me, knowing that I have autism, they could be wondering, why are you talking to me in that manner? Why why aren't you talking to me like we're just having a regular conversation? Because I think for the parent or parents, I'm sure they're wanting to be proactive and being careful in how they approach their child in that manner. And I'm just thinking out loud here, putting myself into the shoes of the parents and why they may be taking that approach with good intentions, but only to discover that when they come to your office, just talk to them like you're just talking to me. And I think
It,
that's a big discovery for people. Yeah.
well, so many kids with autism say that as one of the things they first start to communicate is, you don't have to talk to me like I'm a baby. But it's so hard as a parent, and I know for me that was like a lesson. I joke around. It was a lesson that I had to learn as well, where it was like, all right, I can't treat you based upon your level of expression, because that's what we do, right? When someone talks to us, and you can even think of when an older person has something like a stroke where speech is impacted, right? You start to maybe talk a little slower, and maybe they might need it, but maybe not, right? And you're a little bit more careful with your words, and you might even notice the tone of your voice is like a little bit higher because you're a little unsure. Right? So when the feedback isn't coming back, then parents and people do behave a bit differently.
So what causes autism? I mean, if you had to put it in layman's terms, how could you describe that?
So there's not one particular thing that causes all autisms. So autism is a spectrum. And on one side of the spectrum, you might have someone who's able to speak, but not have back and forth conversation. They might speak very deeply about a topic they're interested in and then not much on anything else. Or maybe they're only able to say, like, I want water, I'm hungry, that kind of thing. If you ask them, how was your day? There might be absolutely nothing. So there's a variety of ways that speech can look. And maybe that child can dress themselves and as they get older, cross the street, maybe drive a car. Um, and on the other end of the spectrum, you have more profound autism. So that might be someone who never speaks, who has difficulty dressing, might not even be able to cut their food. So they can't cook their food, they can't cut their food, they can feed themselves maybe. Um, and so that is all autism. So to try and come up with one single thing that is common and is a cause for all of that variety is really difficult. So the way I think of it is more in terms of risks. So there are well-established studies that talk about what causes an increased risk to autism. And there's a lot. There certainly is a lot. But then it also makes sense because then those are the areas that parents can focus on to improve health. And when health is improved, then a lot of these barriers, let's say to speech, can be removed, and then the child is able to do things with their body which they always wanted to do, right? And then their body is finally not limiting them. So that's really how I think of autism.
Hmm.
And it's just really difficult to try and explain autism by one single thing, one single cause. I don't think that will ever really happen.
So, having said that, a question that I have is then, I guess sometimes a parent or the parents will come in and say, okay, so give me a checklist of how I can just fix this. But you're saying that, well, there's various degrees, so not one list per se, quote unquote, is going to fix this all. And I think, and
Yeah,
along with that, I think I guess they're probably expecting, can we solve this within 6 months to a year?
tomorrow. No,
Yeah.
tomorrow.
So I imagine you've had many stories like that.
Oh yeah, of course. And I myself, I wanted to resolve things as fast as possible, and I would always feel like, oh, I'm not doing enough. I'm not going fast enough. And when I work with parents now, it's really let's go as fast as everyone is still smiling. That's the pace you need to go because this is your experience as being a parent. So you don't want these 20 years or so to be misery, thinking that, oh, we're just never to where we want to be. And then this is your child's childhood. You don't want them to feel inadequate. You don't want them to feel like there's something wrong with them, right? There's a difference between there's something wrong with their soul, their character, their essence, or there's something with their body that's not functioning. So that's really important for a, a parent to keep in mind when they're talking about things with their child is that it's not as if they themselves, their child, there's something that needs to be fixed. Something with their body, yes, but not with them and who they are, because kids then internalize a lot. And we don't want to impact their confidence. They have enough challenges already that we want their confidence to grow and not to be so hindered thinking that something is wrong with them.
Sure. Because I mean, I have to imagine sometimes some parents may look at their child thinking, well, he or she doesn't understand what's going on, but really they do understand.
They do.
And I
Oh,
think
goodness.
it's kind of an enlightening period to, and I think to your point, one needs to take that step of, I'm going to be talking to you as a regular person. I'm not going to, okay, here's what we're going to do today. And I would be on the other end thinking, okay, why you talk to me that way? I'm just a regular person.
Yeah. Why are you talking to me like I'm stupid? Why are you talking to me like I don't understand? And just imagine if you're a child, that's your life. And everyone is talking to you, maybe even at school. Maybe at school, you're only doing like kindergarten stuff for 10 years, for 15 years, right? Because there's difficulty either in speech, there's difficulty in motor planning, so pointing to certain things. So if you're limited in the ways you can communicate, people just assume that you're not comprehending. And then that's your entire life, not just your parents, but that's everyone who's talking to you like that.
Now, I know of a couple who have autistic child, and at first they didn't really pick up on it. And it wasn't until their parents were noticing something whenever they would take care of the child. And at first blush, they thought, I don't think it's anything. But then the mother said, I think the child could be autistic somewhat. And as they would point out some of the observations to their son,
Uh-huh.
he became, I don't know what you're talking about. That's not true. And I don't know whether or
Mm,
not he just refused to accept it or he just didn't notice it.
mhm.
And I think for the grandparents, they were feeling very, I don't want to interfere with your life, but I'm just
Right.
wanting to offer my insights of what we've noticed, and you might want to check it out. I mean, how do you get those two together, the parents and then the grandparents, to say, here's how we could work together to work with this person who definitely has some issues with autism?
So grandparents are very important to be in the lives of their grandchildren, for sure, especially with autism. So in 2017, there was research done, and grandmothers who frequently saw their grandchildren, an autism diagnosis occurred 5 months sooner than kids who did not have grandparents involved. And for grandfathers who were involved and frequently saw their grandchildren, the autism diagnosis was received 4 months sooner. So it's definitely important for grandparents to be involved because they can see a child's development progression or lack thereof because they're seeing them frequently, but not every day. A lot of times with parents, you're in the everyday and you're just trying to get out the door and all this stuff. So you might not have the time to really think about, is my child progressing the way they should be? And maybe a pediatrician hasn't said anything. Some pediatricians are very proactive and others not so much. So it does become a little bit of a awkward situation potentially if a grandparent sees certain things and then it's time to talk about it. So first off, I would encourage it. So if a grandparent is listening to this, definitely figure out what's the best way to have that conversation. And so it's an important conversation. So these are conversations you want to think about. You don't want to just kind of, all right, let me just off the cuff go, call them up. Maybe your adult child is, cooking dinner. It might not be the right time to have that conversation. And then that conversation goes sideways. So, or bad, right? So we don't want that. It's an important conversation. So if a grandparent is noticing certain things, think about how they want to approach that to their child, to their adult child, and then figure out when would an optimal time be. And you might say, hey, could we just, have maybe 10, 15 minutes, let's set it aside where you and I can just talk. There's something really important to me that I want to talk to you about. And then with the grandparent talking to the adult child, it really depends on the relationship that is there. um, so sometimes there's some contention. Sometimes there might not be a closeness. However, there might be a desire to have a closeness, right? So relationships can look all different for sure. And it would just be important for the grandparent to approach it with as much honor and grace. So to also think of the flip side and be like, wow, okay, if I was raising a child and my mom came and talked to me about autism, how would I make sure that it doesn't sound like I'm blaming them or that I'm saying they didn't do a good job? Because we as kids, we want to do a good job, and sometimes we're sensitive, right? We talk to our parent and all of a sudden like we're 50 and we're 10 years old again, right? Like, it just kind of happens sometimes. So these are the things that the grandparent has to be really mindful of. So they might start out with saying something like, I want to talk to you about something I've been seeing, and this has no impact on how I think you are as a parent. I think you are doing an amazing job, and I know the world is different from when I was parenting, so I acknowledge that. But I just want you to know whatever I say, I do not mean for it to be rude. I do not mean for it to somehow feel like criticism. And in some relationships, you have to say that out front, just so that everyone's on the same page. Other people, if they have a really close relationship, maybe not. But still, when you're having such a delicate conversation as this, I think it would be important to really set the stage, so that your adult child is not defensive.
Have you ever had, Dr. Lyons, where you had the parents and the grandparents come in together to talk to you about here's how we could bridge these conversations to be more productive in a positive manner, but also for the benefit, not for just the parents and the grandparents, but for the child itself?
Yeah. Yep. So I have I have been in the middle of many and awkward conversations where it's everyone wants the best for that child, but then there's a lot of maybe history kind of rolled up and bunched and so it's really about focusing on what typically everybody wants, which is the best for the grandchild. It
Sure.
just
Yeah.
becomes some difficulty into how do we go about that? How do we prioritize? And how do we make sure that the adult children don't feel like they failed? So I didn't have my parents telling me I failed as a parent, but I felt like I was failing as a parent just because my daughter is doing all these things and parenting was I'm like what I'm not being successful whatsoever. So even if you don't have a parent telling you that you're failing, uh, an adult child who is parenting might already be feeling that. Um, so it's just important to keep in mind.
Is that somewhat the first knee jerk reaction from the parents who have a autistic child that, oh, I failed. What did I do wrong? I mean,
What did I do wrong is definitely at the tops. So what did I do wrong? Or I knew I shouldn't have done that, right? So sometimes um, it has to do with there was the child had an infection and needed an antibiotic, or the child, something that the parent decided, yes, let's do it. Around that time, if parents see the regression, then they blame themselves. And so they're like, I knew I shouldn't have done that. So that definitely are the top two initial kind of emotions. There's a lot. There's certainly anger and grief, right? Now the parenting experience is going to be totally different. It's going to be different than your friends. So sometimes later on, you'll start to feel jealousy, like, oh, they're having that ideal parenting experience that I thought I was going to have, and I don't have anything close to that. So that there can be a lot of emotions that parents experience all throughout this journey.
sure. I think the emotions even escalate as the child is getting older and the parent has to wonder, what can I do to help my child, you know, make it through this world, difficult as it is today, and it's not getting any better, to have to worry and, as you say, not feel like I've let them down. I didn't give them enough guidance to eventually make it into this world that they can somewhat survive on their own, if you will. And I know of a mother whose child, it was very difficult, but by God, she stayed with him all the way through his adulthood. Now he's working for a company that offers a program for autistic people, and he's working on computers, which he just absolutely loves. He's earning a
Awesome.
salary. He's, you know, paying taxes, as he says. But he's learned that, hey, I can make it. I can make it in this world. And I think that's where I think a lot of parents maybe still have that fear, even though, okay, we're doing okay, but sooner or later, does that child walk out the door and do their own thing, or do I need to be with them for the rest of their life? I mean, that must be go through their minds quite a bit.
Certainly. I mean, that's the goal of parenting, is to launch your child out into the world. And so parents do get worried and concerned, or I'm going to be the caregiver for the rest of my life. How is that going to be? Do I want to be that? Right? So you can start to get a lot of emotions just over that itself. And things can be going well with your child, but if the parent is stuck on that, then their emotions end up getting stuck, and really colors the journey of that child. Um, so it's definitely something that autism parents deal with, because not every child with autism becomes independent. That is certainly the case, but there's a lot of beauty in which people with autism who still need caregivers for the rest of their life, there's a lot of beauty and also independence that can be created. So many kids want to still go off and get their own apartment, right? And okay, maybe they need a caregiver and the parent has to hire certain things and put in different program supports. Like that one gentleman you were talking about, right? He probably always wanted to get a job, right? That might have been a dream of his. Kids with autism have dreams, and they have dreams just like everybody else does of, I want to buy a house, I want to get married, sometimes I want to have kids, I want to have a job, I want to have friends, I want to have a pet, right? And so sometimes these things aren't as easy, um, but it's still worth going towards.
Sure. Now, you called out that through your studies that autism isn't always lifelong. I think that's something you discovered as you were doing your investigation. What does that entail? I mean, I think when people hear that, like, oh, good, there's hope, but it may not work for everyone. But what are some of those attributes that could lead to that, where autism isn't a lifelong issue?
So a lot of that has to deal with health. And so the diagnosis is based on observation, and parents really turn to functional and integrative medicine to say, why is my child not speaking? So, for an example, there's something called cerebral folate deficiency. And for kids with autism, about 70% of kids also have cerebral folate deficiency, which you can do a specialized blood test to determine if this child has autoantibodies in their brain that prohibit folate from the normal transport routes. And if they do have these antibodies, then they need a prescription that is the same folate, but it just gets transported in a different way. Right. So there's many ways to resolve a folate deficiency, but you've got to know if that's an issue for your child. So this is how kids with autism, quote unquote, get better, right? They don't just kind of grow out of it, but it really stems from looking at their health and looking at it in a root cause way. So not just, oh, they're not speaking, that's just going to be the way they are the rest of their life. More like, they're not speaking. Okay, what could be impacting that? All right, let's look at cerebral folate deficiency. Okay, what else can we look at? Well, are they getting adequate hydration? How is their digestion? Are there any gut infections? Have they been exposed to any toxins? Right? So these are the things that parents really look at and identify what the issue is for their child and then focus on that.
Could that be a book?
It could, yeah, but definitely that would be maybe the next book.
No, that's
But
interesting because I didn't know that. And I think just hearing about some of the things that people could address, at least try to minimize it as best as they can. I would imagine there's a lot of people out there with autism kids who don't even, or are not even aware that, hey, there is some hope to where you can work towards minimizing, the track that your child is taking right now. And I think that is something that, to me, that was unknown. Now,
well,
go
same
ahead.
to me. But I learned that when I did the deep dive into, okay, what is autism? So we have this diagnosis. What can I do? I can't just sit back and do nothing. That is not my nature. I love chemistry. I know chemistry. I need to understand her chemistry as to what's going on. And so that was one of the publications that really shifted things for me was back then it was 10% of kids with autism lost their autism diagnosis, and they called it an optimal outcome. And so, I reached out to the researchers, really talked to them. I wanted to really understand that. And then once I was confident that that is a realistic outcome that parents are having, then I need to really know more and more about this. And, a decade earlier, that number was 5%. And now, currently, a decade later, that number is 37%. So the number certainly is increasing. People are getting a lot more knowledgeable. They're getting more focused on the body. So again, it's not about saying there's something wrong with the child, there's something wrong with the way they think or the way they do things. No, we want to make sure their body is really functioning optimally so that they're not restricted. The autism diagnosis comes from when things are restricting the child from participating in life. And as a parent, nobody wants that.
Wow, I never would have thought of that. Now you mentioned maybe I'm not sure if I heard it from you or I was through my research, but what does non-persistent autism mean?
So that's what the researchers now have classified autism. So with the number being 37%, right? The number is getting quite large. You can't really call it an optimal outcome anymore, just because it's the size of that number. So what researchers are starting to understand, and this is really cutting edge, is they're starting to classify autism as non-persistent autism, and the still classical essence of autism that remains. And that's something new that researchers had to come up with new terminology to explain this large number of kids who are, regaining their health and not needing additional support.
Gosh. So when a parent comes to you with their child, um, what's your approach to getting them comfortable, Dr. Lyons, to talk about this topic? Because I'm sure it's just an overwhelming moment in their life that they're coming to you or another doctor in hopes of, how do I begin? How do I even approach this? How do I talk to my child, as we said earlier? I mean, and from what you've been describing thus far, this is a very complex medical, well, I don't know, diagnosis, if you will. I'm sorry, I'm not a doctor, so I'm just kind of thinking out loud here. I mean, what's the approach? That you've taken, and what might parents want to think about asking you when they come to visit for the first time?
So when parents come to me, they always want to know the why. So same as with me, I want to know, why is this going on? They're very focused on what is it that they need to do? What is the actual issue relating to their child's health? And then we can get focused on doing different functional medicine tests to really quantify, okay, this is what the issue is. Because so many times parents do maybe some basic blood work or something like that, and doctor's like, nah, it's fine. It's fine. It's autism. There's going to be problems. It's just, that's just the way it is. So when parents come to me, they know me as a chemist. They know me as an educator because I've been on YouTube over 10 years. And on YouTube, what I do is I would take one scientific publication and I would explain it. And I would explain it in the sense that this is what the research is. And then parents have to go a step further and really start to analyze, is that relevant to my child? And that's the part that gets kind of frustrating, because there could be some great research, right? But it doesn't apply to everyone. So parents have to become very discerning in the sense of, all right, let me make sure I only do things that could actually benefit my child. And so, how do I start to think about that? What am I trying to analyze before I do something? I don't want to just try anything and see what happens, right? Because that will get exhausting and that's not a good strategy. So, when parents come to me, it's really about wanting to understand the chemistry, the science, and really have a good understanding of what they need to do, what to do, and then how to retest and make sure things are going in a beneficial way.
Wow. So, what about for the grandparents? I mean, there's the parent and there's the grandparents. And I think, as we said earlier, um, you've had opportunities where I believe you said you've spoken to both sides
Oh, yeah.
in the
Yep.
same conversation.
Yep.
But
Many times.
it has to be, I can only imagine there's been moments where, in your mind, you're thinking, excuse me, well, I think I'm trying to help them, but they don't seem to be wanting to accept that direction of help. And when you hit that roadblock, how do you try to pivot
Uh,
to then say, if I understand where we're going with this, you seem to have these issues, you seem to have these issues. How do we diffuse them to where we're both going down the same path in a positive manner?
so that comes to having a discussion of what are the top 3 things relating to autism that would improve either the child's life or the family life. So come up with a list of 3. This way, you could have a grandparent put in one, a parent put in another, and then there's kind of like a mutually agreed upon one or something along those lines. So you have your top 3 things, and then you just use science to really say, okay, how can we resolve that? And you take out that the emotion that is tied to, oh, this is what I think you should do, and it's really what do we need to focus on for the child. And then once you have those symptoms, phew, you use science.
Right. And I think in part, what I liked about your approach is that you do a lot of research, and I think you gather the data to substantiate, what you're talking about. I think that's for some people, they miss the boat. They're quick to make judgments. But until they hear
Yes.
from, yeah. And I think until they hear from someone like you, the porch light goes on. Like, okay, now I get it. Now I understand.
Well, see, I don't have many opinions, right? So, like, when parents come to me, I don't have, oh, this is what everyone should do. No, 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 not at all. I will teach you the science. Let's focus on your child. What are the symptoms? These are the symptoms. This is what needs to be focused on. But it's not my opinion. So, doctors, they end up practicing based upon their opinions and their theories. And so that is something that I don't do because I'm not practicing on any of these kids. I'm more the strategist. So I have the information. I can teach you the information. I can teach you as to whether or not it applies to your child. But then the rest is up to you to say, all right, now let me get a doctor who focuses on that way, on that problem. I've seen a lot of things where parents go to a doctor because they've heard great things, and it doesn't go well. And many times it's because that doctor is very good at particular things. Let's say that a doctor is very good at mitochondria, right? And what if this child with autism, mitochondria is not their top issue, right? Maybe it's more of a gut issue. And so parents will go and the doctor will say, okay, well, let's do the mitochondria and let's just focus there. And there's a mismatch. So that happens commonly, whether it's the parent has an opinion as to what the cause is, the grandparent is like, no, it's really this. The doctor might be like, this is what I believe. And I don't get involved in any of that. This is what I believe. I understand the science. I read the science and then I explain the science. And I teach people how to critically think for themselves as to what is most important for their child. Because that's what is important. You can't just do the same thing for everyone with autism. It just doesn't work.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I think you called out too that, people who come to you are just quote unquote hungry for clarity. And,
And they don't just wanna do things, they wanna understand why. Like, they really seek information and they trust science, not blindly, but they trust science and value science being the guide.
yeah, and I think in this world of wanting instant gratification, I think people are sometimes I think they come to you and say, "Well, why can't you give me something I can solve this, in a couple of months?" And I think you're kind of missing the point here,
Yeah,
because you can provide the clarity, you can provide the data, but until they understand, you know, this this is a process that you're going to have to work with, and you're going to have to make adjustments. But by the same token, as you said earlier, just talk to your child, treat them as a regular person, because I think if you go in and you start doing the very obvious um, comments of making them feel, for lack of a better word, ignorant, they're
uh-huh,
going to say, "Okay, maybe I am, and I just I can't get out of this mode." It's
right, yeah.
extremely difficult, and so, but I think what's been the most in the journey that you've been down thus far. What has been the most um, I don't know, lack of a better word, beautiful moment that hit you that made you realize this is something wonderful. I'm so glad that I'm doing this and I'm helping people, at least provide them some clarity as to how they can best approach this. But what was that one tangible moment that said, I'm glad I did this. I'm glad I went down this road. Yes, my child got autism, but as a result, look at the people that I'm helping
I
get
have that
started.
many times a day.
Well, that's good. That's good.
I love what I do. I mean, just earlier today, I was doing a live stream with one of the coaches that works on the Navigating Autism platform. And what we were doing was we were role playing um, when a parent feels like I'm just failing my child. That was the
Mm.
scenario we were role playing. And, there was a parent who was in the comment section and, really saying, I'm so glad I'm catching you live. This is something that is always on my mind. I always feel like I'm not doing enough for my child. And they got to see me kind of explore that because I definitely felt that many times, right? So I'm not pretending in the sense of I never experienced it. And I've worked with many parents who've had that feeling and how do we get them out of it? So, this mother was so grateful to see the dynamic of how do you have that experience, that thought and be coached professionally out of it, like start to climb out of the hole. And it's not in the sense of, um, oh, let's just get positive and it's the autism journey is long. So you've got to have a really strong mindset because you need that for months, right? And so the comments that she was making just reaffirmed for me why I do this because I'm helping her not have the same struggles that I did. And then, another parent was commenting about how they have this kind of thought all the time as well. And so it's bringing light to an emotional side of the autism parenting journey that is often kind of brushed aside and a lot of times we have shame. We don't want to admit that we might not feel successful, right? Nobody wants to really admit that. But it's a reality of the autism journey. So that's just today. But there are so many times when kids start to get better and they start potty training themselves or what the child handed back the iPad because they were like, I'm tired, I want to go to bed, and mom's like, what? Sleep used to be a problem. We used to not sleep for months and months. And now my child is healthier and they're starting to realize, oh, I'm tired. I want to go to bed, mom. Right? So there are these amazing things that happen all the time. And I've experienced that so many. That's why I can confidently say that their child is comprehending things at an age level appropriateness. It's just the expression that is really lagging behind. But once certain things are done and that can start to catch up, then it's just amazing what the kids know and they've learned all along, and their character, because you've got to remember these are kids who might not have felt good every day, right? They might have had a stomach ache every day or a headache every day or joint pain or a whole variety of things, but yet they still got up and were determined to participate in life as much as possible. Even if they had meltdowns and there were difficulties, right? They get up the next day and be like, all right, let's try it again. So I have moments like this just all the day, all the time. And I'm very thankful now because I'm on the flip side. So I went through all those difficult days, but now my mission is really how can I help parents navigate through those days and feel those emotions, but not get stuck in them.
Right, because I think, when you talk about what you went through, Dr. Lyons, it's something that you can then share with others. Like, well, okay, I had that moment, but here's some insight as to how you can deal or handle that type of situation. And I know of a person who has a autistic girl, beautiful child, and now and then they will share videos on things that they do on the outside, go to parks, whatever. And their interaction is so genuine that honestly, you wouldn't think there was something wrong with the child.
Mhm.
It's like they're laughing, they're giggling, they're playing. And I feel like, to your point, that's how it needs to be. So that it helps the child understand as you're growing together, hey, we're in this together. So
Yeah, it's
I
a
mean, that's how
partnership.
you have to look. I mean, it's hard, it's difficult, and I think some people just don't expect it. But sometimes life will deal you a deck of cards that you weren't expecting.
Definitely. For sure. This was not what I was expecting. This is it just yeah, there's ever since the autism diagnosis, there's pretty much nothing in my life that I'm doing that I planned. So I'm just
No,
going with it now.
that's good. No, that's wonderful that you're doing all this, and and I can tell that it's not work per se; it's a passion of love. Just hearing how you're describing it and why you enjoy doing it, and I think for many people, you're the type of individual that they're looking to find to help them. So I think, so if there was one, I don't know, glaring point, Dr. Lyons, for people to walk away with from this conversation and what you've been sharing, what would you want to tell them?
I would tell them to trust their intuition. So most parents have this little voice that when they see their child, they're like, "Ugh, I know they're in there," or "I know they can be doing more." There's this little voice, and, I really would like parents to trust that voice because it's right. There's so much improvement that can happen, regardless of whether someone retains an autism diagnosis or not. There's so much with health that can be improved that when their intuition is telling them there's something else, really to go with that and to follow that intuitive voice.
Oh, that's great. So I usually end our conversation with some speed round questions. I provided them
Okay.
to you. And over the past, some of the answers I've been getting from some of my guests have been quite funny, quite
Okay.
surprising. Okay, let's
I
go
don't
with
know if I can guarantee to be funny, but we'll
well,
see.
let's go with the first one. What was the best live concert you ever attended and why?
I'm actually not a live concert person. I don't think I've ever paid for a ticket to go to a live concert. Ooh.
How about to a theater play or something like that?
A theater play? Let's see. It's been a long time. So this is what happens to autism parents. We prioritize our children, and, this is definitely something I talk about, how parents have to take time for themselves. I used to go to play I went to the ballet. I was in Manhattan, a few summer goes, and I went to, Midsummer Night Dream at the New York City Ballet, and that I definitely enjoyed. And I remember thinking, "You should do this more often because you like this," and, um, so that would be the most recent one, and it was enjoyable. It definitely was.
Well, good. That's great. What do you wish you had more time to do? Maybe go to a concert?
Maybe more more free time. If I had more time, what would I do? I really do love my work, so
Mm.
I would probably say get better on, social media and, work more. But outside of work, I do like to paint. It's something that I do only every once in a while. I do oil painting, and I never took any classes or anything like that. But when you can get into that flow state and then just like tap into just an artistic expression, usually it's a snapshot of something in my past. So the last one that I was working on, it's not finished, um, is like a campfire, and it's by the lake, but it's dark. So painting the lake this really dark blue color, and like the rest of the night blackish, but you had to make sure that it couldn't all be black. So it was kind of fun to play around with the colors that way. So I definitely wish I had more time to do that.
It's very therapeutic, isn't it?
And flow state, like, and staying in flow state and just being like, all right, let's not overthink it. Let's just go with it.
Like my wife and I, we took some watercolor classes online, and I've learned that painting with watercolors is not forgiving. You make one mistake,
Oh.
you're done.
That's why I picked oil paint. I have a lot of oil. The first oil painting that I did, it took like 2 weeks to dry because I had painted over it and over it and over it.
Um,
Lots of mistakes.
so, what was your first paying job?
The first paying job was babysitting. I mean, obviously that was off the books. I wasn't, if you're
Sure.
talking about like my first paying job was babysitting. But then if you want, like where I was paying taxes and all that, it was when I was 18. I worked in Manhattan at a Japanese trading company, in their chemicals department. I love chemistry, always have. And I worked on, importing and exporting chemicals all throughout the world. It was just amazing. I learned a lot.
Well, that must have been a fascinating job.
Yep,
Uh,
it definitely was.
so, here's one for you. If your child wrote a book about you, what would the title be?
Oh my goodness. Oh, she's 16, so it fluctuates. Like I'm the best person in the world one minute, and then the next minute I can't even breathe right. Um,
Well, there's your title.
oh, what would yeah. Uh maybe she always believed in me, even when I didn't. Because that's something my daughter tells me a lot. Just at her lowest moments, there were times where she's like, "You really believe in me?" I'm like, "Of course I do. You're just having a bad moment. It's all right. Feel it. You'll be fine tomorrow."
So you're
So
doing it.
maybe
So you're
something
doing a
along
great job as a mom, then.
I do my best. I don't know about great, but I do my best. And when I make a mistake, I own it. I'm like, listen, I messed up. I will try and do better in the future. So,
Okay, final question. What would you attempt to do if you knew you couldn't fail?
oh, this is the way I want to live my life. Oh, zero limits is what I would like to live my life. Anything. Like I would just love to not have that doubting voice. That it used to be really loud, but I would just say it like everything, which
Hey,
is not really a
that's a
good
good
answer, but
answer.
that's like literally a few days ago, I was talking to my friend about how I wanted to really think about life in zero limits. So, not be concerned about that fear of failure. And I used to take failure so personally. And I've learned more of that growth mindset of, okay, if failure is teaching and it's not so personal. Um, so yeah, I would zero limits is my goal for life.
Okay, that's a good one. No, now that's different. I've never heard anything like that before. So, Dr. Lyons, I really want to thank you for taking the time to speak with me and to the audience about this world of autism, and that there is hope. That one shouldn't take it as failure, but for lack of a better word, a learning experience that some people are going to go through. I mean, there are people who are dealing with it, and it's like, well, you're not the only one. There are other people out there that you can probably interact with, get some insight, find people like you to discuss this. So I think to that end, I think the audience today will walk away with a much higher degree of what autism is about and how to deal with it should it, come into their world one day. One never knows. One never knows. So to that end, I thank you, Dr. Lyons, for taking the time, and to our audience for taking the time to sit down with us and hear this wonderful conversation from Dr. Lyons. And to that, we'll talk to you soon.